Hello, everybody. Cal Griffin here with you. If you hadn't already suspected, usual suspect. Morning, afternoon, evening, night, dark cave, dark hole, wherever you may be, whatever you may be doing. And also, disclaimer: do not recognize any political affiliation, sexual orientation, or gender. This is, and also any topics that brought up that breach that warning will be given. And if ignored, one will be excused by without their permission. And also anything that may be a charged topic will also be asked to refrain unless it is in a relatable topic of what is being discussed or addressed within reason. So, with that being said, something that I was having a discussion with my apprentice, and something that came up was autonomy, self-autonomy, and how our environments and the examples set in front of us as we were growing up affect us later in our lives. And that is a more common occurrence and a more practiced without conscious knowledge of it more than we would like to think. And that we do things that also from groups we're with. And I'll get to my point here in a minute. I'll get to that. I'm on where all this stems from. A lot of the times that there's things that along with it that we do unknowingly, which invariably unwanting problems that come up in our lives that can cause problems. And, behaviors, actions, thoughts, reactions, reactive behavior, uh, affection, lack of, or, things to that nature. I'm sure the list could go on and on and on, but, I don't think I have that much in me to talk about all that. But how does this affect our lives today? Well, and the autonomy is that when we have the examples set in front of us when we're growing up, and depending on the crowds we're around or our home environments or our important people that we look up to in some way, don't let us say what we need to say due to their own upbringing. And that is something that's passed down, passed on. And I'm not trying to claim victimhood here, and I don't want anybody using this stuff as victimhood or a tool or a claim. I'm not a doctor. This is just only from my own work and research that I've done. So that's the only claim to this or acknowledgement I can give to this, because it's something that affects so many of us, that why things may be getting repeated with us, and we keep finding ourselves in situations with people that when we need to speak up, we don't have the courage to speak up, because at some point in our lives, repetitively, we were told to not say anything. And that would get, influence, that would get repeated. And, of course, anything that gets repeated over and over and over again either becomes something we believe or something we end up practicing. And so it becomes ingrained some way into our behaviors, our actions, our thoughts. And there's all kinds of other things that this can affect. So, like, say, for example, how we express ourselves, okay? Or how we might respond, how we might carry conditioned behaviors throughout our lives. And then we figure out, apparently along the way, that this was not a good thing. But yet, where we may reside, where environments where we may work, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. Relationships, where it might come from. So then we find ourselves in areas, topics, discussions where we don't say something that we needed to say, or we don't understand why we keep doing this, but don't know what it is. We don't know what is or why. Okay. And then we keep repeating this cycle. We keep doing these things that we don't understand, and they keep harming our lives in some way, which we never wanted in the first place. We didn't want the results, the consequences. And then once we start to finally figure it out, once it starts to become apparent, because somebody pointed it out to us. And this will go into one of my lessons that I've also got on the Jedi conduct. That once we acknowledge it, that's one of the biggest steps. Okay. That's the hardest step. It's recognizing where it came from. All right. But where that learned and conditioned behavior can be that little inconspicuous demon on our shoulder that keeps talking to us in our ear. You got the angel, you got the demon, you got them haggling back and forth of what you should be doing or what you want to be doing, what you need to be, all that good stuff. The two things there. So, and then we beat ourselves up for not saying something. Then we feel bad. We feel less. This can hit our self-esteem in many ways. And then we go back around it for some way, and then it repeats again. And so we still get that little fix from it that reinforces what we do. Now, this is where, once we started to recognize what we do, then that's when the work really has to start. That's when we have to really start putting pen to paper. We have to start going through the process. We have to call it for what it is. Learned, conditioned. And this can be a menagerie of things, to how we might talk to people, to maybe how we might manipulate people, to maybe how we say things or what we say. And what and how at the same time. Or habits we may pick up that we think, well, that's just who I am. That's just the way I am. No, we could figure that out by who we are, and traits by mannerisms, natural mannerisms from the people around us and the people that we are around a majority of the time. But I'm getting a bit off topic here, but I think it all goes with it, is that over time, we will discover things about ourselves that we've been avoiding because we're afraid to figure out what actually is going on. Then when we do it, there's a discomfort with it because we're having to take a real hard look at ourselves. We're having to change, but we've got the claws sunk in so deep that you have to get a pry bar in there to start popping the claws loose. It's like that little cartoon where you've got a cat or somebody like the coyote and the roadrunner, where they're hanging on the side of a cliff and they go up and just start popping fingers off. And they're like, oh, no, please don't do this. And then they end up falling, right? So from there, that's how we see things. We get our claws dug into it because we don't want to let it go, because it's who or we think or believe may be a part of us. So that's the human thing about the human brain is it can relearn. It can change what and how we think, but we have to dig into what it is. We have to find the whys. We have to find the reasons. We have to find the definition. So, and what I mean by the definition is we define what the actual problem is. We define how it affects our thinking, our daily lives, unhealthy things. Now, I'm not claiming to be a guru here on better living and speak in tongues or a foreign language and understand the universe. No. On this one, I'm speaking from my own experience, my own work I've had to do. And it can sometimes be very difficult because it causes us to admit things that we don't want to admit, things we keep holding on to and going back to, things that were comfortable for us, right? You know, in my last podcast, I talked about getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. And that's true because anything that's different than what we know, but it's something that's better for us, is uncomfortable at first. It's change, it's different, which is important. If we don't change, if we don't grow, if we don't put in the work, then how do we expect to become better Jedi? How do we expect to pass on something and teach others the real meaning of this? And I'm not talking a umbrella definition here, okay? Because as Jedi, you know, we're supposed to have a conduct. And just willy-nilly being very nonchalant about things and saying, well, that's not my problem, when actually we're the cause of the problem. And having that attitude about things. Well, everybody's got a part in something. Everybody's responsible for something. Whether it be we were involved with something and recognized the problem and stayed with it and decided to go down with the sinking ship. Well, if we saw the problem and we knew it was going to be a problem and there's nothing we could do about it, time to bail. Get off the ship and hit the life raft and start rowing as fast and as far away as you can. And we've done everything we can. Get out of Dodge. Because there will invariably be people, even in the community, that will help reinforce and enable and placate these behaviors because it suits that person's wants, it suits that person's desires, it suits that person's ego. And there are groups that are no longer with us that unfortunately might have potentially been or had something good to offer, but for whatever reason ended up going away. But there was a recent development here that one of the longest standing groups, due to the actions and lack of action and motives, ended up corrupting a once standing known order. It was based on ideals, and it was based on a certain faith and religion. And so in there, you're still causing some of the same behaviors to still be present because you're not actually doing work. You're merely trying to get numbers, which is a lot of things are going to be skipped over. A lot of important training areas. Recognition, accountability, responsibility. And then that if one's trying to change, then you need to be around people that are supportive of change and not for selfish motives and reasons. Because there are people that will keep us in those things for their own reasons because it's comfortable for them. Because it's what they know they don't want to get away from. But because it makes them feel good, they'll keep doing it and supporting that unhealthy behavior. Or they will, let's just say, ignore things for the sake of, because it protects them. And then the denial of things, the lack of accountability, which is when we're being autonomous, we have to take responsibility in that. We have to acknowledge it. We have to get there. We have to learn to speak up where we might have been stifled, but the right way. I'm not talking come in and guns blazing and, oh, I found, this new thing that makes me a better person and I feel like a better person. So now you must deal with me on this with the chair and the whip and taming the lion. No, that might have been something that we did in the past. Maybe not being as diplomatic because we weren't shown how to be diplomatic. We were shown to be more forceful, incite, cause unhealthy behaviors. And then yet we go, I'm going to keep practicing this unhealthy behavior. When it's the last thing in the world we really want to be doing. But it's something that just, I don't get it. So just, word of caution on that. If somebody keeps poking that thing that keeps you going back and reinforces what you're trying to work through to pull out of your life, to uproot, maybe that might be part of something that's part of your past that is also part of what you're doing in the present. The past always affects the present. I don't care what people say. And some people say, detach from it. Well, when you detach from it, there's two things or multitude of things that can happen. If you detach from it, you can neglect it. Or you can you could take lack of responsibility for it. Well, it's not mine. What I said, I don't understand why that person's being the way they are. Maybe it was something that you learned along the way that was something that over time greatly affected parts of your life, like jobs, being insubordinate, or not being reliable, speaking when you shall not speak, or it's prudent to not. And then when it's prudent to, we don't. Because something inside of us stifled it. Something inside of us said, no, that's a bad thing. And I digress. But sit back, take a look at things. Take a look at that cycle that you keep going through. Sometimes it's hard to spot. It might be that little flea that keeps escaping as you're combing through. You know, like when you're combing through your dog, that little flea, that one little flea that decides, I'm making a break for it. Come and catch me if you can. You know, and so it keeps getting away. And then it has other little fleas. Went away if you think about it. We are that one little flea that keeps sprouting off little baby fleas, or that problem we have, or the lack of autonomy, self autonomy, and becoming autonomous. Now, I'm not talking with everything that's going on in society today about my truth. No, I'm not talking about that. And if that's what you're going to follow and you're going to justify your behaviors because of this, then you're barking up the wrong tree. You're just trying to justify ignoring and not acknowledging. But I digress. So look at something in your life that keeps reoccurring that you didn't realize. That proverbial German cockroach that just won't go away. It keeps antagonizing you. It keeps antagonizing people around you. That, oh, if we ignore it, it'll go away. No. Because if you think about it, there are people out there that will remind us of ourselves, or remind us of that's where I once was. I want no part of that. Or maybe they just keep trying to incite the behaviors that you're trying to get away from because of the lack of their own work. And all they want is acknowledgement for all their deeds, but yet the real acknowledgement comes from what they need to address. And maybe they just think they're too good because they're too awesome. So they're full of awesomeness, but yet they acknowledge what's unhealthy as a good thing. So, and that becomes an account of reliability there. It's like, well, they're helping me. No, they're not helping you. Well, they accept me. No. They accept you because where you're at is in a place of comfort, familiarity. You're ignoring what you need to be addressing, which is that autonomy thing. But yet, we can be overly autonomous only by our own experiences that we haven't addressed, and we blame others for it. Don't be that person. Don't be that guy. Don't be that person. That's not a good person. That's not a healthy person. And there's a much deeper rooted cause. And I hope what I'm saying makes sense. I'm hoping that what I'm saying, people can relate to it on this one. Because we've all got work to do. And whether we choose to not do it because, oh, I don't need to because I'm in a great place. How do you think you got into that great place? One of two ways. Either A, you have just put everything in a box, you've put it in the closet, or you've buried it under the house, or you actually worked through it and you're free of it. Now, I'm going to touch on something here real quick. I might get backlash on this. I might get some pushback, and that's fine. I want that here. Okay. But there's a part in the Sith code, okay, chains that bind, I'll break them, and that I'll be free of things and I will grow and develop. And I'm paraphrasing. But did you ever think that those chains are the things that held us back from improving? Quit making excuses. And we made excuses instead of trying to become more powerful. Well, we are becoming more powerful. We're becoming and gaining power over what controlled us. Things within ourselves that controlled us. That master, that hidden master, that coward. And if you're one of those people that everybody else is the problem, maybe it's time for you to take a look instead of talking noise behind other people's back. Because that person that you're talking about might end up being the last person that you want to get into that ring with. Because they've done the work. They're not going to justify. They're going to acknowledge their flaws. And they do it all the time. But there are people that won't. And they'll use this whole victimatic story. You know what? No, don't do that. You're wasting people's time. You're doing that to hear yourself talk. You're doing that to keep reliving what you're doing. And then use that as your reason, your excuse, your expression. Get real. Grow up. So, you know, we all have things we have to work on. No one is immune. No one is excluded from this. If it's causing a problem, solve it. If it's causing guilt, stop doing it. If it's hurting people, quit hurting people. If it makes you lose sleep at night, find a way to help get yourself to sleep by addressing what keeps you up at night. Maybe it's your boyfriend, maybe it's your girlfriend, maybe it's your husband, maybe it's your wife, maybe it's your kids. Maybe it's your work environment, or maybe it's something in your past that keeps haunting you. But do something about it. Change. Learn. Grow from it. Use it as experience to pass on to other people. Because if you're looking to be a knight, or if you're looking to be a master in the Jedi community, or if you want to lead a group, you have to be able to do the work first before you can lead anybody. You can't just step into it. And then you still have to learn along the way. Be open to learn. I got asked one time, what makes a master? They've made more mistakes than the knight, and they will make greater mistakes as a master. And they'll have to learn the lesson from it and apply it. And then that's the lesson they teach their student or their apprentice. Or they use as a lesson in an order. That's what makes a good master. That's what makes a good knight. It's not just the title. It's what you do with it. It's how you represent it. If you're one of those knights or masters that goes around and you're causing problems with everybody, then are you truly a master? Are you truly a knight? That means early on in your training, you didn't acknowledge what you needed to. And you were living an idealistic fairy tale training. Don't do that. Because this community is already struggling. We're already at odds in so many different ways. It's because people don't want to acknowledge what's their problem. And they pawn it off on somebody else. It all starts with us as individuals. We can't solve the problems around us if we can't solve our own problems. We can't come together if we don't address what our own personal issues are and try to pawn them off on somebody else. That's not the way. That's exactly the opposite of it. In The Mandalorian, when all the Mandalorians would go, "This is the way," think about it. Think about that. I know it's a cliche. I know it's from a series that was very popular among a lot of people. And I enjoy it. But you think about it. This is the way. This is the way we get better. This is the way we all grow. This is the way the community becomes more defined. This is the way all the unhealthy, toxic things get squeezed out. This is the way we all set in one direction. Now, if you want to discuss this, fine, go ahead, come on. That's what this is about. But I ask each one of you to think about this. What is it that you're avoiding to address that keeps haunting you today? That we go, well, be detached from it. You're going to be detached from it. If there's anything you're going to be detached from, of those things we really don't need to be attached to in the first place that are none of our business. And if you're going to solve a problem, Don't become part of the problem. Don't try to solve the problem when you're not qualified. Stay away from it, but just observe it. Learn from it. And then if you have a solution that's practical, logical, reasonable, then suggest it. But don't try to solve the world's problems if you can't even solve your own. But address those things that keep haunting you, that keep ruling your life. And maybe I'm going to say this again, we can talk about it, provided you're healthy. Is it look at the Sith code, but in a good way, what it can produce to grow from in a reasonable way. I'm not talking for the search of power. I'm not talking for the search of chaos. I'm not talking about that brand of Sith. I'm not talking about the unwilling to actually be healthy. I'm talking about those that actually are doing the work, that are trusted. That some will say, well, Sith can't be trusted, but on the contrary, there are very few that actually can be. So just in general, just look at that code and see how it might apply to you. And then maybe there's aspects of it that might actually help. And don't be so turned off because it's not the Jedi code. It's not the light side Jedi. It's not the Jedi way. Isn't ignorance part of the root? And isn't knowledge part of the growth? And isn't the passion to pursue within reason, and which causes peace within? So I'm going to leave you with that. That things aren't always as black and white. There's always still gray areas in there. So unless this is kind of a, hopefully it made sense. Hopefully it addressed some areas. Hopefully it helps. So anyway, one thing I do want to leave with each one of you, though. Fear, as they say, can be the mind killer, but also fear can be the motivator. Fear can help incite the change that we need to take, which in turn turns to courage. But don't try to be the law enforcement when you're not. Don't try to find justice where justice isn't needed. Or maybe you're part of the problem and you just don't want to say. You don't want to admit it. You don't want to face it. But if you are, have the balls to do something about it. Step forward with yourself, face yourself with the courage to do so, instead of quit spreading the poison. So anyway, everybody have a good day, good evening, good morning. Maybe that cup of coffee is what you needed. Maybe that glass of tea might be what you needed, or maybe that lemonade, or maybe that hug from somebody, maybe a pet in your dog. Anyway, this is Tal Griffin from Tal's Chambers. Everybody have a good one, and may the force guide you. Take care. I'm out.